Okay. Are we ready? Oh my goodness. Let's do another one of these crazy things. Okay. Oh, that date is wrong. But, okay, welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to recreate another painting by another one of my very favorite artists. Today we're going to be looking at the work of Anish Kapoor. Anish Kapoor is probably most well known as a sculptor. Come on. But we are going to recreate one of his paintings, or a sculpture that hangs on the wall that's made with paint. However you want to think about this particular artwork. It's called All Inside Myself, and I've just since I saw it years ago, I always thought it was such a bizarre, strange thing. And we've been painting a lot of relatively traditional works over the past few months, and I thought this might be something just a little bit different, that might appeal to some people that want to experiment a little bit more with materials. Now, I am going to do sort of two versions of this. I'm going to do one that I'm going to paint, and I'm just going to make it look sort of realistic, and then I'm going to do one where I'm actually going to be dipping pieces of canvas into color and gluing them onto the canvas. So I'm going to be sort of approaching this painting from two different ways here. So before we get too far, I want to let you know that there is a outline that I did for today's painting. So I kind of zoomed in on it and then did an outline. I traced the image on my iPad Pro using the Procreate app. And you can download this and print it out, and I'm going to transfer it onto a canvas in just a moment, so I'll show you how to do that. So to find that image, this is the image itself, right from Anish Kapoor's own website. Right, here's a close-up of this thing. It looks gooey. It's made of canvas and silicone. So that's how you get this kind of weird, like, organ kind of, like the insides of someone's body kind of texture. Anyway, we'll talk about the painting here in a moment. If you click in there's a Dropbox link in the description below, and there's tons of artwork in here. Stuff that is, there's the Mona Lisa in here, and there's very traditional works of art. There's Picasso and Van Gogh and Emily Carr, and I mean, every different kind of artist you can imagine. Grandma Moses. I'm trying to think of somebody who might be anywhere near this. Maybe the closest artist we've covered might be Marcel Ferrand, the Quebec artist, who did abstract paintings, some of them using a blindfold and with a palette knife. That might be the closest thing to about what we're about to do today, which is really exciting. That's one of the reasons why I chose today's painting. So click, where do we go? All the way down here to, there's a lot of paintings we've done. We click in here and you're going to see there's 4 files. There's the outline, there's the zoomed in version, and then one that's a little bit further out, just so you can see the full scale painting, which is it's a large painting. So download that, print it out, and I'm going to transfer it here in a second. Just before I jump to that, I just want to let you know that there's a private Facebook group just for people like yourself who are watching and painting along with me. And here's where you can take a photograph of today's painting, upload it to the Facebook group, or something else you might happen to be painting or working on. And every month I take a look at all of the work on there, I pull them off and organize it, and then I talk about the different works that you guys are making and offer a little bit of constructive feedback and lots of kudos and congratulations, because anybody who's making art is doing the world a service. I saw this, there's been a lot of rain here in Vancouver. There's always rain in Vancouver, but a lot recently, and there's been a lot of flooding. Our family, we live kind of high up in an area of Vancouver called Mount Pleasant. It's not really a mountain, but it's much higher up than downtown, and out in the like Abbotsford and Hope, Chilliwack areas where there's been lots of flooding. Anyway, so I appreciate the love here, Gail, checking in with me. Okay, so let's. I want to transfer this, and then while this is sort of drying, we'll talk about Anish Kapoor's biography. So. What I have here is a canvas. This is a 9x12 sized canvas panel or canvas board, and I've gessoed it. After I bought it, I opened it up out of the plastic and I gessoed it, and then I sanded it so it's a little bit smoother, which is typically what I do. And then I printed the outline that I just mentioned from the Dropbox, and I just used my inkjet printer. In the most recent episode, I printed it out right at the very beginning of the episode because I forgot to print it out beforehand. So I'm just going to tape it down, and then I'm going to put some carbon paper underneath here, and I'm going to grab a pencil, and I'm just going to go over this pretty quickly because I don't think it's super important that all these lines are in the right place. But I think this is a really interesting composition, so just from an organizational standpoint, I think it might benefit just to be in the same sort of zone here. So I'm not going to do every line. Most of these, the longer lines, I think, is what's important to me. So really, this should take no more than another 2 minutes, I think. Because I think there is a little bit of an absurd. It's a little bit absurd to try to faithfully reproduce an abstract painting, or a painting like this, which is, sorry, there's nothing absurd about trying to faithfully reproduce an abstract painting per se, but an abstract painting like the one that we're doing is pretty absurd to try to reproduce it, you know, with any level of fidelity. But again, I do like the composition, so I'm going to try to capture some of that here. One of the things we'll talk about is Anish Kapoor is a bit of a controversial artist recently for what's the best way to put it? I guess some would say monopolizing and trying to prevent others from using a specific material called Vanta Black, which is a very recent invention, and I know that there's probably some people who will watch this video and at some point will probably leave some negative comments about why I would want to feature an artist like Anish Kapoor, considering some of the animosity that exists against him within the art community at the present time. But I think that situation aside, he is one of the greatest living artists and one of the most important artists, one of the most influential artists, and one of the most highly visible artists. His art, as we'll get into in a moment, we'll take a look at some of his famous public artworks that are essentially iconic sculptures that you probably have seen, at least if you haven't seen them in person, you've seen them on television or in movies, etc. So, okay, that looks pretty. I actually love how that looks. That is cool. I'm so glad I did this. Okay, so I've got that transferred. What, that took maybe 3 minutes or so. And so I'm going to keep this just in case I want to refer to it. But if you don't want to keep it, recycle it, paint on it, tear it, and use it for scraps or something. Okay, so I'm going to keep that, and I'm also got this one. Now, if we look at the original, it's been painted, well, I think it's some sort of raw canvas. And raw canvas is generally not white. You know, when you get these cheap canvas boards from the dollar store, they are already pre-gessoed, and gesso is generally a white material because they mix kind of almost like a plaster into the medium. So then it turns the canvas. So this is raw canvas. This is what raw canvas, when you stretch it over a frame, looks like. And you can see it's got a little bit of a different color. It's a kind of a bit more of a eggshell or unbleached titanium kind of color. So I think let's try to mix a little bit of that color and apply it onto these panels to start. So how are we going to do that? Let's get some paint on our palette here. I should also say, maybe even before I go too much further, in terms of materials that we'll need, we're going to need some canvas. We're going to need some scissors. I've also got some glue. This is just Gorilla Glue, which is a really good wood glue, but you could use your Elmer's school white glue. You could also use matte medium or gloss medium if you want. Matte medium is just acrylic paint without any color in it. It will dry transparent, and it has an adhesive quality to it because it's what, when you paint, when you paint onto a canvas or any other surface, you're essentially gluing the pigment to that surface. So you could use it. Obviously, it's not going to have the same gluing properties as like a wood glue, which is really going to glue something really well. The main difference between these two substances is medium might be a lot more flexible versus wood glue. Once it dries, if you try to bend it, it'll probably crack as opposed to flexing. It might flex a little bit, but certainly not as much as like a matte medium. Like you could literally paint on something on canvas and then roll it back up. Not ideal, but if you did it, the paint is not likely to crack. So there's that. I'm going to use a little bit of tape, perhaps. I've got a couple of cups here to put maybe some water and dip some color in as well. Okay, so I'm going to use a bunch of different materials. So, with this painting, we're going to use a lot of warm red here. But I'm not going to squeeze it all out just yet. I just want to make a color that will go on to the background surface. I think I'm just going to use some warm red, warm blue, and warm yellow for the time being. If you're wondering about the colors that I use in every episode, there's links in the description below to the colors, but also to a video that I made a year ago. I think it's called Art Supply Buyer's Guide or something like that. Okay, and I'm going to squeeze out some of this white. Ah, there's Lolly again. Nice to see you back. Paula and John all joining us. Cool. We got the old band back together. That's great. Okay, so I'm cutting up this tube because I'm gonna use all of this here. Let's scoop out some white. Maybe I'll just scoop it all out. Right, that's enough white that you could probably get a couple of paintings worth in one of these from the ends of one of these tubes. I don't know why I'm using so much white. I don't really think I need that much, but we'll see here. If I don't want to use it, I can always put it back into a jar. Okay. Just gonna clean my materials as I go a little bit here. Makes it easier to clean up at the end of the night. So let's mix a color that approximates this color of the canvas. Right, so what this and I hope it's visible, the difference between the gessoed canvas and the raw canvas here. Right, this is what a canvas will look like before it's gessoed, right? Maybe I just said that. So I'm going to make a brown, and so I'm going to take some, and I'm going to make a warm brown. So I'm going to take some warm yellow and warm red, mix that together, maybe a bit more yellow, probably a bunch more than that. And then a little bit of warm blue. So it's hard to say at this exact moment how close this color is to the color I want, because I'm going to mix it in with some white. And I should have probably cleaned this brush a little bit before I started mixing here. So, because basically there's so much color in here, and I want this obviously to be much more subtle. So let's just wipe this brush off. Okay, so how about I'm going to take some more of this white. Let's put it right here. And just take a bit of this. Pretty close. What do you think? Good enough for government work? I don't know. As my grandfather always used to say, that's pretty darn close. That's pretty good. Okay. Usually I use some water to dilute this. So I'm just going to take more of this white. So I'm going to end up using, I think, most of this white anyway. Now, obviously, I need to add a bit more of this back in there. And even though this has got a little bit of orangey quality, I think that color will dissipate once it mixes in there. It's a little deceptive. I think I'm going to put a bit more water in here, because I want to cover two canvases with this. And also that water, this is the only time I ever use water when I'm painting with acrylic paint. By adding a little bit of water, it's also going to make it a little bit thinner, so when I paint over all the pencil lines, which I painted a few moments ago, I'll still see some of these lines, right? So Often I paint a warm yellow to start on the canvas, but since I do that when all of the paint is going to be completely covering that base layer. In this case, this color is going to be visible throughout the entire painting, so I'm okay with painting it like this. I know there's probably a few of you who are like, "Oh, I painted it yellow again and you did the opposite. Oh, you're driving me crazy, Michael." I'm just trying to keep everybody on their toes. If you did paint the warm yellow on the background, as I've done many times, that's okay. You could just paint that, and then I would just let it dry and then paint this color over top. You're probably going to get maybe even a better result than I will, but since I'm trying to do 2 paintings today, I'm trying to just maybe pick up the pace a little bit. Okay, so maybe some of those lines look like they've disappeared here. As this dries, those lines will come back a little bit. And I can also see them very well here on, maybe on camera they're a little bit more invisible. And so here's my second canvas. This is the one where I'm actually going to put torn canvas onto the surface. So I am curious to see how many people actually do today's painting. I saw there was some chat on the Facebook group. People were like, "Yeah, I don't think I'm going to do today's painting." So, which I totally understand. I don't expect anybody to do any of these paintings. I'm surprised that anyone's doing any of them to begin with. Maybe you're just watching and you're painting, working on something else. That's totally cool. Totally cool. Okay, so I got that on there. Looks pretty close to the original canvas color. So I'll move that out of the way, and I'm just going to clean this brush off real quick. Dolores says, "I'm interested in this painting, but I don't think I want to do it." That's okay. And what a small world. Dolores' daughter works at Emily Carr, the university I teach at. I didn't even... Maybe you probably mentioned that before, Dolores, but my brain is spread so thin that things generally just sort of go one in one ear, out the other ear. My wife has to tell me things about 10 times before it registers. So, but what a small world! Yeah, that is really cool. That we ran into one another too. So I'm glad that she said hello. Okay, so these are going to dry for a few minutes. While they dry, let's just take a little bit of a look at the biography of Anish Kapoor. I'm going to move that over here for right now. Okay, so in a few moments we're going to start painting this painting. So here is a photo and the Wikipedia page for Anish Kapoor. So he was born in 1954, so he's age 67, a fairly, kind of like middle career artist right now. And he is, he was born in Mumbai, India, and raised there. for the first, I think he when he was 17 or 18, he went to Israel to study electrical engineering. So his mother was from Iraq, and she's Jewish, and his father is Punjabi Hindu, and so he was born into this family. Obviously, went to Israel, and must have been at least partially into the Jewish faith, right? So I'm not sure exactly, being from two parents who are very, very different religious backgrounds, that would probably be, he's not the only person to have that kind of situation, but I wonder what sort of role that played in his art career. Anyway, while he's there, he decides to become an artist, and in 1973 moves to London, England, where he goes to art school there. He goes to a couple schools, but most famously the Chelsea School of Art and Design, which is one of the major art schools in the United Kingdom. And after he finishes school, he spends kind of the 80s and 90s working on these sculptures. Now, I don't know how much is there. I didn't really read the Wikipedia page. This is just other research and videos and stuff and interviews I've been watching. And also, when I went to art school myself, I had a sculpture teacher who was obsessed with Anish Kapoor. And so we spent a lot of time looking at Anish Kapoor's art. And this is long before he made this sculpture here, which is probably his most famous sculpture, sometimes called The Bean, but is actually called Cloudgate, and is in Chicago's Millennium Park. And this has now become, arguably the primary symbol of Chicago. I think when a lot of people think of Chicago now, they think of the Cloudgate sculpture, or the Bean, as most people call it. Like, if you go to Chicago and you don't take a selfie in front of the Cloudgate, you probably haven't spent enough time in Chicago, right? And it's this beautiful, super reflective, giant shape that you can obviously walk right under and you can touch. And because it's this super polished steel, obviously it reflects, but because it's kind of it's not a flat surface, the reflections are all distorted, right? They cause this kind of both a fisheye lens kind of quality and this, I don't know what the opposite of a fisheye lens is, right? This so it's kind of like a funhouse mirror that's free and open to the public all day and all night long. So it's become this very, very iconic artwork. But before he does that, he's making these sculptures that look like these kind of blocks, and he carves into blocks. He makes these sort of pools or what look like holes in the floor, and you look in and you can't really tell how deep that hole actually is. Does it go all the way to the other side of the earth, or is it just a couple of inches down? Because of one of the things that he's particularly famous for using at an earlier point in his career is basically just pure pigment without any medium in it. So you can imagine, we've talked a lot about using medium in these classes, but we haven't really talked about just using powdered pigment. Most pigment comes, you can actually buy it in a little jars, because it can be quite expensive, and then some artists will mix their own paints together by mixing the ground powdered pigment into some medium. Anish Kapoor sort of did the opposite, just took the powdered pigment and adhered it, or just like shook it onto these sculptures. So there are really, really, really intense colors, right? They're super saturated colors. Absolutely gorgeous sculptures. I've seen a few of them in person in real life, and they are really beautiful. They have like a very bizarre, almost sublime quality when you see them up close, because we never really see anything that is that matte, right? That's another thing that we'll talk about here, is a lot of his artwork has no reflective quality. I mean, and then here we're looking at the exact opposite. Cloudgate is super reflective, but a lot of his earlier sculptures, sort of like these kind of shapes here, you know, you look into this block, and you can walk all the way around this block, for instance, and you know, it's maybe you could probably almost wrap your arms around it, but when you look inside of this black hole, it looks like you could crawl into it and run down a long empty hall, like, because it's just, you have no, your eyes are playing tricks on you, right? And a lot of his artwork is like that, where you want to just touch and feel even though you're not allowed to. But I think that's actually kind of a cool thing, is like the fact that you can't touch it and you're just trying to, like, what am I seeing, or what am I not seeing? I don't understand it, right? So here's what we see here. And then, of course, he's done these other artworks using mirrors, and these different colored mirrors. And the idea is like something like this, where you can kind of go right up to it, and you kind of almost put your head into this shape, and everything is distorted around it. And so that particular thing with the mirrors relates to, have I already opened it up here? So these, the sky mirrors, these are cool. There's one of them in Central, there's a few of them all over the world, but famously one in Central Park. And they're a gigantic mirror that is just pointed up at the sky. And so they're very strange looking, because when you look at it, they're very strange, and yet also so ridiculously simple. But there's something about the size of them. And then let's say you're standing here looking at grass and trees, and yet you have this sense of a big sky right in front of you. And then even other things where it might be pointing at a bluer sky or a grayer sky when you're in behind it looking at a different colored sky. And it's very, very strange. You know, and sometimes there are different shapes, etc. So this is the kind of artwork he was making for, and he still makes artworks like this. But this is sort of how he came to prominence, is making these smaller sculptures, often using powdered pigment. He started doing things with wax and mechanical moving parts that were activated and would, you know, project wax at a wall and splash and do all sorts of wild things like that. Let me see if there's anything else I want to talk about. He's been involved in a few lawsuits. Maybe we'll talk about some of the stuff with the NRA, him suing the NRA. Here's another kind of very reflective piece. Oh, and I forgot, this is another kind of very famous artwork of his that he created for the it was it's part of the London 2012 Olympics. It was the accelerometal orbit, or arcelormittal orbit tower, observation tower, and it is the weirdest thing you've ever seen. And it's also been ridiculed, as you know, the English newspapers have been wont to do, as being kind of an eyesore. Some people say it's like the modern Eiffel Tower. You can let me know in the comments what you think about this big, huge sculpture. But it's right next to the Olympic Stadium in London, in the Olympic Park there. And it's made of, you know, it has, like the Eiffel Tower, it has all these exposed beams. But there's, you know, you can see here there's a slide in it. There's an observation deck, so people go all the way up to the top there. I think it's really neat. And I'm so happy that it got built. Do I think it's the most beautiful thing ever made? Not really. But I do think that it is. I love when things like this get made, because it presents the possibility that more strange things can get made. You know, here in Vancouver, where I live, there's a lot of buildings that look exactly the same. You know, Vancouver's been called the City of Glass by Douglas Copeland, and it's like these cookie cutter giant skyscrapers. Every single one looks exactly the same, often by the same 2 or 3 different architects, and I just find it so boring. So anytime I see different types of structures being created, especially large structures that take up the field of view of city lines and skylines, it gets me really excited. Even if I'm not the biggest fan of them, I'm just like, wow, that makes me happy, because it gives other people permission to do weird things too. And I think we need more weirdness in our world, right? At least from the visual art perspective. Okay, I think let's get into today's painting here, and because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about related to him, but it looks like our canvases are just, this one's dry, and this one's almost dry, so I'm going to blow dry them to jump start things a little bit. Okay, have a teapot there full of hot water, and it's like, should I just pull that cord around it, or should I just put the teapot on the floor so it doesn't spill at one point, because it will inevitably spill the moment I think about that. Anyway, I'm going to mute the mic. Okay, so I'm just thinking to myself, which way should I begin here? Should we begin tearing some canvas or painting on some canvas? How about let's get a little bit of work done on a more traditional painting. Excuse me. Because there's probably the majority of people are probably not going to do the bit more messy, three-dimensional type of painting. So maybe let's start this, and I'll sort of get that going, so anyone who wants to do that can be working on that while I start doing a little bit more of a weirder painting. Okay, so let's put these things side by side and just think about how we want to progress here. Alright, so that's the zoomed in version. Maybe I'll stay out here like that for right now. So, with a painting like this, I think I'm also going to get some cool blue out to make a darker color. I'm going to use some warm... Oh, that was more... I got that was some more warm blue. I guess I'll be using a little bit of that then. But before I do that, let's... I want to mix a dark color together so that I can use to modify my paints later on. So I'm making kind of a really, really dark gray with my warm red and what would normally be my cool blue, but that's got paint over there, so I'm just doing it over here. Right now it's got a bit of a purple quality to it, so I'm going to add a little bit of cool yellow, and this cool yellow is going to kill the saturation in this paint. So now I can mix this with some more warm red, and it'll act basically like a black. Okay. And I'm gonna need more of this warm red here, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some darker reds and then sort of build my way up to some a little bit lighter reds on top. So I'm mixing my dark color with some red. Now this red was in here, so maybe I didn't have to do quite so dark, but I like having, now I can also make it darker or lighter as I go. That's why I make a bigger batch of that to go. And I think I'm going to just use a smaller brush for this next part. Let's see, how small do I want to go? I think this should be good enough. So again, let's get this queued up. And I'm going to just start painting. Maybe not everything. Maybe everything's not going to be exactly the same, right? And I'm not really super concerned about making it exactly the same. So here's these sort of darker areas. Now he used silicone to do a lot of this painting, and it looks like he sort of dipped this paint in silicone and then sort of draped it, and it's splashing and making a big goopy mess. Well, I think we'll do a little bit of that when we do the actual painting itself. When I sort of try to replicate a little bit of that technique here going forward, but you know what? I'm just gonna paint that and then I'll paint over top of it. See, I'm just sort of moving all over this canvas. I'm not starting in one corner and gonna get that perfect. I'm just gonna keep on filling this up. So I'm not exactly sure that all these lines are going to stay like this. Right, we're just going to we're going to build up a bunch of layers of color. And then I'm just sort of getting, so I'm mixing color, and then I sometimes I'm gonna go in deeper into some of these darker colors here. Maybe much less red. You know, it's funny, some people have asked me a number of times, like, do I get worried or stressed out before these shows? And generally I say no, at least not anymore, because I'm becoming more and more comfortable with trying to do these like spontaneous recreations of all these different paintings. But I will say that doing a painting like this does make me a little bit anxious, because it's much more outside of my comfort zone, where it's like, whew, okay, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. I'm crossing my fingers. I mean, I have some confidence in my own ability, but let's see. Let's just see how things go and cross our fingers. Okay. So that's pretty good. How about let's just go now into some more red with less and less of the darker color. And I can improvise a little bit, like, you know, if I just feel like I want to put one color down here or there, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to be hard on myself. Or I'm going to get some splatters here at some point soonish. Getting a little bit more red. These are all warm reds too, by the way. I like how, you know, with this painting, or at least as it's coming together here, I like this kind of heavier, darker colors up top, and then as we come down, it's getting lighter and lighter, and we'll have a bunch of areas down here at the bottom where there's almost no paint, or at least not any red, I should say. I also want to be careful I don't completely fill up all of the initial white of the canvas. I want to preserve a bunch of that if possible. And I could see some people, you know, approaching the painting in the same way, but having a very, very different looking canvas at this particular stage, right? Okay. How about I'm going to also take a bit of this color that we made earlier for the background. I'm going to mix that in here. Wow, this is... I'm kind of enjoying myself. This feels very weird. There's something nice about not really knowing what you're doing and feeling like a little bit out of control. Like, art is one of those places that it's like a safe space to lose control. You can kind of just go a little bit nuts, and what, at the end of the day, what is really at stake, right? Like, if this painting, if I could just go wild with it and it goes off the rails, well, so what, right? Take even just a little bit more white and just allow this to get kind of goopy and gross looking. You know, if I was painting with oil paints, I'd be able to really get some just lots of beautiful mixing and grossness, like really amplify that. It's much harder to do this with, or to do that with acrylic paint, because everything is drying so quickly. And yes, we've done things where, and I have slow dry medium. I'm looking at it right now here on my table, but so now I'm taking a bit of this warm yellow that I had here before. I'm just going to mix it in, because there's a bit of it right up here that might be a little extreme. That's okay. We'll just paint it in. Let's see, is there anywhere else that could work? I kind of want just a bit more of that color down here, just to balance things. Okay. So I'm getting happy with where all this is. So now that's, oops. Come on back. Come on. Come on. There we go. I want to do the same sort of thing, but I want to go to a much smaller brush. I've been doing all this work with a big wide brushes, or one big wide brush. So I just want to modify the size of some of these marks. So I'm going to go down to a much smaller brush here with this red. So let's go back. And I'm almost kind of like just dragging the brush around to try to get some of these drip splatter effect. I think I've got a toothbrush here that I can use for some of this. I know I have a toothbrush that I use for my actual teeth upstairs in I'm pretty sure I have one I've used for painting. Oh, I have one right here. I'm looking at it right now. Okay, cool. So we'll get a little bit of splatters going on here. So I'm not really looking too carefully at the original. I sort of am glancing up and back and forth a bit, but I'm allowing myself to play while I'm doing this, and like my intention from the outset has not been to try to do a faithful reproduction, a photorealist, you know, Glenn Brown reproduction of this painting. I just want to use it as inspiration. Okay. Now how about I do... I guess I need to mix, I need some more white. Basically just going to mix that original color that I used for the background again. So take some warm blue, warm red, white, or yellow mostly. Not the exact color, which is fine because I want to make this a bit of a darker color anyway. It's cool. It's got a bit of a pinkish quality. I mean, basically, if I really want, I just get a bit more of this warm yellow in here and just more white, and I'd be right off, or right on. Because what I want to do is take just a little bit of glazing fluid. And just give some like shadow and maybe I should have done this. I could have would have been a good idea to do this right off the beginning, now that I think about it. I could have painted the whole painting in a bunch of very, like, almost like a cubist painting with this soft, with slightly darker shade of the background color in different places. So it's not working out the best here because I know I'm mixing the reds in there. It's not quite dry. But that's okay, because how about I take my toothbrush here and I'm gonna get my toothbrush wet here. Let's dip it into this warm red. Just sort of liquefy that red here. Now, I'm just gonna move things that I don't want to get paint all over them.
Did with all the others, and took photos of her naked, also to use as blackmail. Because this was his way. He gets naked photos of them, and then if they try to go to the police or they try to speak to anyone, he threatens them with releasing their naked photos. Okay, and also kidnapping, and he threatens their families and all that. And you have to understand, in China, if you're a man with that amount of money and that amount of power, that amount of guanxi, that huge amount of connection, those amount of connections that he has, he can make your family members disappear. He can make you disappear. It is possible. Everybody knows that. Everyone who worked there knew that. And that's why he managed to continue for as long as he did.
Finger along
so anyway,
the bristles that creates these beautiful
gets her to
splatters.
undress her. He undresses her, takes her.
I might be going a little bit overboard,
and
just for demonstration purposes.
He had this weird bullshit about negative energy. That was another one of his excuses, is that if he were to like have sex with them or something, he could transfer the positive energy out, negative energy out, or some bullshit like this. You can read about this crazy stuff. So he would use, well, he got her all undressed. He used like vibrators on her and all this kind of weird shit that she's obviously didn't consent to, and then he raped her. Okay, but it just so happens that she was having her period at the time.
Definitely covered up this area, which didn't have nearly that many drips and drops before. How about I do the same thing? I'm going to go to my dark color, even though it's not really, doesn't really have this color there.
If you read through
Let's just keep on going, right?
That was his main argument at the end, was that this was consensual and that all of these encounters were consensual. But the fact that she was on her period was one of the big reasons that the court actually agreed that it wasn't consensual, because in China specifically, the thought of a woman having a consensual sex while she's on her period is pretty much unheard of. It's very much against the norms, societal norms and traditional norms in China. So she was having her period, but he raped her anyway. And then he instructed her to take a shower and wash her private parts with toothpaste, as what he used to do to try and get rid of evidence, I guess. Toothpaste, I don't know why, but that was what he used to do.
That's a lot of drips.
And
which I like,
of course,
but
she went back to the dormitories and she was crying and upset, just like all the other girls that have been raped by a complete monster who forces them to undergo all this humiliating bullshit and then wash themselves with toothpaste.
Toothbrush off.
Whatever.
Put it in the water.
She goes back to the dormitory. She's crying, is talking to some of the other staff, and they just console her because they've all been through the same thing, probably, And
someone says there's an awful conversation.
Here's where things differ
in this video. I'm going to close a bunch of these tabs here. Must be some video or something talking here. Okay. Let me know if you still hear it. So I want to just go back now and just put a little bit more paint back over top, just so that I integrate maybe some of these splatters and splashes in here. So they're not all just sitting there on the top surface. Okay. Maybe I'll just take a bit more white and red and just allow the paint to kind of mix a little bit. On the surface. Okay. Maybe I'm going to set this aside and start working on the other one. I mean, I kind of like the way this looks. It's definitely weird. Definitely weird. But I don't mind it. I certainly don't mind it. I could see probably it's not going to be everyone's favorite painting, but I'll put this aside. And maybe as I work on the other one, new ideas will come to me onto how I want to continue to approach this painting. If there's anything else I do want to do to it. Okay, you can see the splatters zone right here. So let's move this one into position. And I'm just going to take a look at the original and just think a little bit about how I want to do this. In fact, even though I want this to get messy, let's just make sure. I'm just going to wipe that clean so that even though I'm about to make a very messy painting, I want my mess to be deliberate. So I'm also very happy because this is some old canvas that I've had for a long time. And I've never... It got a little bit ruined. And so I'm just going to tear these into strips. I wonder if that's too thick. I'm going to make a little bit of... I'll make a few, some thicker, some thinner. Some probably very thin ones, some thicker ones. How's that? Maybe I'll just gonna reduce this volume a bit. Okay, so I don't know. Will I use all of this fabric? I don't know. But what I do know is I'm gonna probably, if things start getting really messy, rather than just painting on this and then paint dripping all over the place, I'm gonna use a tray. And so here's a tray. This is just from the dollar store. And it's got a bit of a silicone base here. This is actually, I think, a like for drying dishes. You know, you have your dish rack on top of this. And so this is, I use these types of things all the time because if I get paint on it, paint gets on and then I can just peel the paint right off. Right? Another thing that I did do, and I haven't even shown it yet, I did a little bit of prep for today's class. Where can I put this? Is after the last few painting classes, what I did is took the remainder of the paint that I had Maybe let's zoom out to start. I took the remainder of the paint that was on my palette and painted it on these silicone placemats. So originally we got these for our daughter so she could make a huge mess, but we she hasn't been that messy. Knock on wood. So I've kind of been using them in my studio. And what I did is I just put acrylic paint onto these, and because I wanted to see if I could do this whole painting with just acrylic paint. So I'll zoom in here a second, but you can see how easily this paint peels off the canvas here. In fact, let's go to... kind of fun, right? So this is pretty thin, and I could try using some of this. So I mean, that's why I created them, these little strips. So let's keep on going here. So you could try doing this. There's lots of artists that have done. I remember going to school with a few artists that would paint brush strokes onto material like this and then peel them off and then glue the brush strokes onto the canvas so they could kind of like Photoshop a painting. All right. I mean, what would you just say that this feels a lot like super like pleather or something, like very thin pleather, or also reminds me of like what was it, like fruit roll-ups, right? It's very thin. It feels like I could tear it very easily. Anyway, so I'll just tear a few more of these off here. And I'm a little disappointed because some of these were kind of thick. I was trying to build up a thick texture, and they didn't really get to all that thick. But they are pretty cool. I could imagine, like, you can see why some artists could become like totally obsessed with this kind of thing. So we'll see. I'm not sure if I want to use these for today's painting. This is mostly just, this paint was going to go in the garbage anyway. So I figured let's just do a test, see if we can make it work. If it doesn't work, then at least I learned something. Or maybe it'll be a Bob Ross happy accident. John says, did you prepare that thingy in advance? Yes. So this is just after the last few episodes, before I cleaned my palette off. I usually just wipe my palette off onto a towel, an old towel. And eventually these old towel, like this is what they look like at the end of every painting session, and they're just full of paint. But instead of, because I try not to wash too much paint down the sink, because that usually just goes right out to the ocean, and the fishies eat my paint, which isn't good for fish. And anybody who eats seafood, certainly not good to eat chemicals and stuff, right? So, you know, you could then take this and glue this right onto a painting surface, just like that. And the cool thing about this is I could make a whole bunch of little brush strokes and then just take a little bit of matte medium and brush this onto the canvas stick it down, and it would be like as if I painted this right on the canvas. The difference is that I can move it around, I can rotate it, I could take, you know, one color, which is this upside down here, I can layer that over top of that, or I could go this, you know, so it's just like infinite ways that this can go, right? So anyway, I'm going to put this aside. Not sure how I want to use that just yet. This is what I mean, like, it's kind of, you know, when it's a bit stressful, but it's also very exciting doing a project like this, because it's like I have no idea where I'll be 10 minutes from now, let alone a couple of hours from now, what this thing will look like. And I won't be here a couple hours from now. I'll probably try to wrap up within the next 45 minutes or so. Unless things are going so awesome that I'm just like, wow, this is cool. This is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. Okay, so let's take a piece like this, and let's just, I want to look at the original one more time. I'm just thinking about like how big of a strip. Like, do I need it, do I want it to be full length? Like, if it's kind of starts up here, should I just cut it here? Or should I loop it back and let it, you know, or start it up here and have, you know, something like that? You know, honestly, I'm probably just way overthinking it. So, although I already just like how that looks on the canvas. So let's just move this off. Now that I'm getting more and more sure of how I want to approach this, let's get a little, maybe this one is a little bit better here. Let me get this. And I'm going to put some matte medium in here. I've got this water. So I got water. This is the, you know, from my, you know, where I was washing my brushes. That's okay because it's going to get gross and dirty anyway, so I don't really care. Let's stir this up a little bit. And not enough paint coming out of there. Didn't I open a new... Well, you know what? Let's cut this open. Let's stop there for right now. So there's water and matte medium in here, as well as my red paint, which is going to significantly dilute the redness of that red. So even though it looks pretty deep right now, I'm expecting as this dries to get much more transparent. Now, I think I'm going to put this silicone sheet, because it peels off a lot easier off of this thing here. So This is just we're gonna just get crazy. Maybe before, I'm just gonna cut a few of these pieces of fabric because things are gonna get very dirty very quickly here. So my hands might be filthy, and because of that, you know, I think I'm just gonna prep my materials a little bit before I get my hands completely covered. I'll keep one long piece. Couple of longer pieces, a bunch of shorter pieces. And you know what, since I'm on camera, I'm just going to use some latex gloves because that's going to make it easier for me to clean up, so that I don't have to, if I get really messy, I don't have to run off screen here and wash my hands for a few minutes. So I've got all these rubber or latex. When I was painting all the time with oil paint all the time, and I would use latex gloves, and then when COVID hit, I bought a whole bunch more of them, so I got a lot of these gloves. I'm sure probably a lot of you guys have these at home. So I'm just going to dip this in here. And I'm gonna put this on the canvas. Let's just keep on going. This will probably go down as one of the weirder episodes that I do. Now the question will be like, how well will this stay on the canvas? Will it really stick? That's one of the reasons why I put the matte medium in there, is hoping that it would act as a bit of an adhesive. As opposed to just putting water in here. My fear of just putting water would be that the water would break down the adhesive property of this paint and therefore become it would stick less and less. So I'm just looking at the original, trying to think of like how best to apply this here. Okay. So I like all those kind of splatters and drips. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, this is a good idea to use these gloves. So I can peel those off. hands relatively clean. Now, let's see. I'm going to mix a darker color. I could use black, but I'm going to just make this. Sorry, I should show what I'm doing here. So I've squeezed some cold blue and cold yellow in here. Let's do that again. Mix this up. So this is going to be our darker color. So it's kind of hard to see, so it looks a little bit more on the brown side. So I'm going to put a bit more cold blue in there. Whoop, that might be too much, but we'll see. I think it's good. Maybe even a little bit more blue. Very scientific approach to today's episode. I think another squeeze of blue. You know what I'm going to take? I've got some of this warm blue on my canvas here, so I'm just going to take that and put this in here as opposed to more cold blue, because this paint probably won't get used. So okay, I'm going to put some more matte medium in there. And you know what? I think I'm going to put some glue in here as well. So this is my Gorilla Glue. It's like, why not? I'll put that in there. Now I can feel a little bit more secure that everything is going to stick to the canvas. Put a bit of water. Obviously I don't want to put too much water or else it just negates the whole purpose of putting glue in here, right? Because it's going to break down that glue. That is awesome. That is pretty gross. I now have a lot of it. Let's put some more gloves on. It's very funny to me that this is certainly going to be probably one of the lowest viewed episodes that I do, even though I'm having a great time. It's okay. So let's continue on here. Maybe I'll keep doing it this way. Twist it all up. Okay. Oh, cool. Paula says, this is an art we are doing. I found a sheet of kitchen cloth, cut it up in strips, glued it on my acrylic canvas paper. Yay! That makes me so excited that you're getting nice and messy with me, Paula. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to add more red to this and some white. Or maybe let's add a bit of, yeah, we'll add red. Excuse me. And some matte medium. Let's just see what this color looks like before I go too far. I almost want it to be a little bit more. Trying to think how I can get it to be a little more gooey. You know what, maybe this one I'm not going to mix up quite as much. So maybe I'll keep it kind of this more of a swirl. Okay. Have enough strips, or do I want them smaller, thinner? That's okay. And then there's also some, I guess I should also have some strips that don't have any paint on them either, right? So how about I'm gonna, before I put this mixture on, I'm gonna make another batch. This one's just gonna be clear. So here's some matte medium. Put some glue in here again just to make it that much stronger. And I'm gonna stir it up. Now I'm using all this matte medium and glue. So I just want to be careful that, you know, I wash these brushes. I don't let them sit out on the counter covered in glue for any length of time, right? So this brush that I just mixed with right into the water. And so maybe, yeah, I'm not even gonna put some. Do I want to put this on here? Go into this other mixture. This is the one of kind of a bit of a white, off-white thing going on. Believe it or not, I'm trying to refer to the original for some guidance. Okay, now I think I just want to do one more strip with red, maybe right on top here, through here. And just for reference, that's what the original looks like. This is what mine looks like. So let's get cut this one open here. So this container was just a clear matte medium and glue, right? Is there enough red there? I think so. I'll squeeze a bit more in here anyway. Okay. A little bit more matte medium. A little bit more glue. Because this one's going to go right on top. Oh, I like this thin strip. And I'll just stir this up. Pretty thick mixture. A little bit of water in here. Now obviously this is going to take probably 2 or 3 days at least to completely dry. So I wouldn't hurry it. If you're doing the same sort of process as I am, just be, you know, find a place where you can just set it down for a couple of days without it being disturbed. Maybe on your floor of your garage, or on top of your refrigerator, something like that, where someone isn't going to touch it. It's not going to fall down on someone, or, you know, because something like this falling onto someone when they're not expecting it or stepping on it, they might think they've just stepped in a pile of like guts from the butcher shop or something. John says, I have an idea, Michael. What if next project we paint a trumpet with a big horn? It must be terrific. Interesting. What about a trumpet inspires you? Why do you say trumpet of all? Why not a guitar or a clarinet? Or it's an interesting choice of instrument there. Okay, let's do this. One more. Maybe let's get this in here. I think I'm going to get all of these mixed up in here. Ooh, I like these kind of, all these lines coming out of. Okay, where should I put this? So I'm sort of also just tapping some of this down, trying to hopefully that will help it adhere to the surface. What I'm expecting to happen is that as this dries, I imagine all of this will stay together as some kind of a hard clump. I'm also expecting it to maybe peel a little bit off of the back. So it's possible that after all of this dries, after a couple of days, that when I go to try to peel, or if I was to try to hang it on the wall, that there might be some very flimsy parts. And then what I would just do is just take some glue and just put it back underneath those parts. You could use a hot glue gun, or you could use some white glue, and again, let it dry for a period of time. I'm just gonna... see if I turn. Still. Wow, that's also got some weight to it. Like, and you can see from this angle. Wild. I'm just debating, do I want to do any splatters with the toothbrush? Let me see. I want to try to weave anything. Doing a bit of that weaving just there already just makes it feel like things are slightly more connected rather than just one thing on top of one thing on top of one thing on top of one thing. I can feel it actually starting to stick together. I'm actually quite pleased at how that's sitting together like that. Okay. So, there's that painting, and let's look at these two side by side. just thinking to myself, am I happy with either or both of them? Two totally different paintings, obviously. I mean, really, basically, we have like different material. You know, we got something that's three-dimensional versus two-dimensional. We do have some splatters. We've got the same colors are all there. But it does make me feel like I want to build up some more texture on here. This one, I think there's nothing more that I can do that I can really think of off the top of my head, except maybe I could pour some white on here, but I don't know. I think I'm just going to leave that to the side. And maybe just spend another 10 minutes or so on here and see what I can do. I've got all of these containers with big goops of paint in it, and maybe what I need to do is just take advantage of the goopiness of this paint. So this is why I said, like, I didn't know if this painting would be done earlier. So now I feel like I've got this material, let's use it for something. Just taking all the remnants from this palette. And then gobs of color. This is cool. It's fun to paint like this, where it, you know, doing something totally abstract. You're not worried about, you know, if it looks like the original, or if I need to do a little bit more glazing to make it, you know, it's just like, it's pure painting. You know, the original's on the screen over on my left here, but let's see that I'm not really looking at it. I'm just allowing myself to play. Things that I'm keeping in mind, I like in the original, you know, the space at the bottom where there's a little bit of light, but I also want these little, it's almost like, you know, a tree and seeing the sky poking through little parts of the branches and leaves. So I'm keeping that intact. There was a bunch of these splatters and stuff, and I did like that earlier, but you know, I feel like I like this better now than it was. Take a bit of white. There's just some leftover white on here. There's a bit of that yellow, but I don't think it would work in this painting. I like that little bit of warm yellow that made it up there, so I think that could be done here. You can see how, like, I've kind of picked up on a bit of the swirling motif. That I just see this little bit of this swirl, and I've maybe over-exaggerated it, but I don't mind that there's sort of, I'm being pulled into this kind of loop like that. So I think that's good. I think I'm okay walking away from this painting at this stage like that. Okay. So my name. This is how I can paint all over myself. What is the date? It's the 16th. The other one, I'll wait for it to dry before I even attempt to sign that one. Two gooey paintings today. You know, maybe this just looks like a bunch of dirty paint rags all slopped together here on the table. You know, I could, you know, it's... Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as they say. Paula used some coarse molding paste for texture. That's cool, especially if you're not using fabric or whatever. You could really build up some cool textures by mixing that into your paint. Okay, so something very, very different for today. But I think it's fun to try a little bit of different things, you know, get outside of the narrow parameters of what painting can be. You know, Anish Kapoor, again, known mostly for his sculptures, and I think it's fun to kind of look at how a sculptor approaches painting, and then thinking like, oh, maybe he can show us something, a different approach to using paint and the traditional wall-mounted image than by looking at other painters or artists who've been traditionally used mostly paintings throughout their career. So this is, you know, I find this has been really inspiring. Like, will I necessarily do this kind of thing in the future? Probably not much, but knowing, like, I mean, I'm not even sure. We'll see how this, when this dries, how it sets up. But that could be, you know, that on its own would give me lots of ideas. Like, oh, okay, the mixing the glue into the matte medium and the paint, if all these colors stay relatively saturated, I'm expecting them to dull down a little bit because I've diluted them with glue and matte medium and water. So I'm imagining they won't be quite as saturated as the colors in this one. But even if they're 80%, that would be very exciting and surprising. So yeah, there's always something that we can learn from the process of making a painting, and that's what it's all about, right? And I imagine even for Anish Kapoor himself, he probably did not know how this particular painting was going to turn out until it was done. And I think that would probably made him very excited, right? Whether he ends up doing a lot more painting like that is another thing altogether. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining me, for painting along with me. Remember to take a photograph of the work you've done today, even if it didn't turn out. I'd be so curious to see what happened on your side of the camera. So please like, subscribe to the channel. If you want to leave a donation, there's a PayPal link below. If you want us to check or e-transfer, there's also, you can contact me through my email, which is on my website or on the Facebook group. Yeah. So we'll see you guys on Thursday again at our regularly scheduled time. We're going to do something completely different, much more traditional painting. So stick around for that, folks. Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you again very soon. Mm-hmm.